I was actually co-chair of the Women's Business Network for 3 years. So we set ourselves a mission to have more women in tech.
How can businesses keep up with rapid digital transformation?
Yeah, and I think what's important that we reflect on that security is intrinsic to almost every business, particularly when we're talking about digital. So we really need to think much wider, much broader, as we've talked about really with the global pandemic. Many companies are really evaluating their business models, their working practices. What happens next? Do we all go back to the office? Do we continue to work remotely? The reality is we're going to work in this hybrid environment where the people will really have more choices, as we sort of said, about where they work from, what type of devices, when and how they do all of these different things. And that ability to embrace the cloud is really important as well, because it enables them to try proof of concepts, new designs, spin up projects very, very quickly, but they might not have been able to do previously because of the time it takes to kind of procure servers and storage and spin up projects and all of these type of things. So it really comes down to speed and scale. And that's really one of the benefits of the cloud, but it's really being able to take advantage of all of these different things that are available, and just really explore. I think that's the interesting, that's the bit I love really, is that kind of, we talk a lot about agile, which is a fail fast, fail often philosophy, which is actually, if you want to try something new, if you want to have these innovative projects, you can spin something up very quickly, try it out, get some insights, run some analytics. If it doesn't work, you close it down. And I think that's where the agility and the flexibility of this kind of the digital transformation is what we're talking about, that enables companies and even individuals to experiment a lot more. And I think we're seeing as well a lot more startups and entrepreneurs. So even with people evaluating what they're going to do next from the pandemic, it's not just about where they're going to work, but they're even thinking about, I've always felt like I wanted to start my own business, or I've got a really cool idea, I want to develop an application, I want to do all these things. And that's really what we're talking about. So that access to technology, the speed of innovation, and a lot of this capability that is enabled through digital transformation is really what is kind of making all these changes possible.
So you have a passion for women in business. What more needs to be done to improve gender inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it sometimes sounds like a bit of a cliche, but we really need people who can think outside of the box and think and act differently. And this is why diversity is so important. But it's about diversity of backgrounds and experiences and cultures. So it's not about being a woman per se. But it's about being able to celebrate all of our differences and how we can utilize all of those differences to the best advantage. And I think, one of the things that we've been reflecting on is the kind of the big issues, these kind of problems that we're facing, all need to have different perspectives and viewpoints, because if we all have groupthink, we're all going to come out with the same answer in essence, and that is not what's going to help us to innovate or to make these big changes now and into the future. But I also think it's important that we have to remove these kind of false barriers and misconceptions about tech is principally for a career for men, or that you have to be deeply technical to work in cybersecurity, because that's not the case at all. And I also think we have to be mindful about the expectations that we place on young people. So we're expecting people who've never had any experience of working, literally, to have a choice about what they want to do when they grow up or when they leave school or university. And I don't think that's right, really. I think what we want to be able to do is make sure that we're encouraging people to try as many different things as possible, and ultimately that they may pivot, through their career into different things, and that's totally okay, because our life expectancy is actually is getting bigger. So I think they've sort of said is half the people that are born now are going to live to over 100.
Wow.
So your working life, let's say, might be 60 odd years. So actually then, people having children later in life, they're having career breaks, there's so much change that's coming, that's the kind of thing that we're having to think about, really. And therefore, how do we embrace those possibilities and enable people to almost try and completely different things? And it's okay, you don't have to have a decision right now that I'm going to work in finance, I'm going to work in tech, I'm going to work in, whatever. Just try lots of different things, because it's only when you try lots of different things that you're going to find something that you either really love or really hate. And I think that's the difference, really. So I just want to, it's about encouraging people to have choices, to remove the, like I say, these false barriers, which is, this is a career for men, this is a career for women, and those type of things, and just have options. I think that's really key when we're talking about inclusion.
So you personally, in your career, how has gender inclusion in the workplace evolved since the start of your professional journey?
Yeah, so when I was at Fujitsu, so I worked at Fujitsu for 12 years prior to Microsoft, and I was actually co-chair of the Women's Business Network for 3 years. So we set ourselves a mission to have more women in tech and senior roles, as opposed to just more women in general. So just to put that into perspective, so Fujitsu is the biggest Japanese employer in the UK. They have 12,000 people, of which about 3,000 are women. And then one of those objectives that we set was also to be a Times Top 50 employer for women as well. And the entry criteria to that is really tough, really hard. So it's not. So we kind of said, okay, so no, we've gone in bold. We're going to be ambitious, and we want to do all of these things. We want to make sure we're doing the right thing. But again, removing those kind of false barriers and expectations. But I think what was interesting to us as well is that if you compare men to women in these type of environments, the statistics on women and ratio to men is always going to be a lot lower. So as I sort of said, Fujitsu has always been around 25-26% women. But they had an objective to get that to 30%, and then over X number of years to bring that up to 50%. But then you have to kind of think about that sounds very, very positive if you're a woman, not so great if you're a man. Because if I was to increase the number of women to 50%, I actually have to potentially remove 3,000 men out of the organization. And that's not really what we're saying, but that is how some of these messages are perceived. So we really have to be careful about when we're talking about what might sound good for one group doesn't then disadvantage another, and that we don't fall into the trap of positive discrimination where we're having these kind of quotas and people feel like they're just a number as opposed to an individual. So this is something we were really mindful of about, we didn't want men to kind of feel that they were surplus to requirements when they got to a certain age, or they no longer had a value to them. That's really what we were sort of saying. No, we want to encourage more women into technology, but we want to do it through natural fruition and just being able to have more people in this type of environment. But the other thing that we looked at was also the way that you use statistics. And actually what was really interesting for us is one of the things is, let's forget about the men. Let's start looking at the 25% women, the 75% men. Let's look at the women themselves. So let's look at these 3,000 women and look at what roles they have and what they're doing. And what's really interesting is that when we had a deep dive into the different roles, actually 42% of the women were working in tech roles. And of those women, there are more women in senior positions in tech roles than there were men. And we just thought, that is what the thing that we should be talking about and celebrating. And it's the same information. It's really just down to how you utilize that information and how you put a positive spin on it. So I think it's just been really important, really, about just thinking a little bit more about our messaging, not having these kind of false quotas, about how we can make it inclusive for everyone. And when we're talking about this equality, and we're talking about giving people the same opportunities, the same experiences, and kind of, like I said, removing some of these false barriers, that is the bit that's important. And I think this is the bit that we need to cling to when we're talking about inclusion.